Ciao YouTube! Today I will be starting my new series of reviews, and I have many coming, so stay tuned, with a very special mouse. It will be the very first mouse that I run my new bar score system for, which tries to give each mouse a numerical score so that I can compare them. And it's a mouse that I have worked on directly. So I will be a little biased, I'm not gonna lie. As you can see, I decided to not make it a secret at all. The mouse is this, the ROG Harpe AimLab edition. If you do decide to buy it, amongst many things you will find in the box, you will find this little card. This card has my signature. So if you do go out and you buy it, you will have my signature. Now, my role when working on this mouse as part of AimLabs, at the time when we started, I was a software engineer and it took more than a year, so my role changed a couple times, but mainly I was focused on how the synergy between AimLabs and the Asus mouse, specifically the firmware, would work. But even though that was my main concern, I was also involved in the shape. So you will see some of me and my preferences in the shape, the specifics of which I will cover later. So first, let's go over the specs of the mouse. Inside the box you will find, as I said, the most important thing, the thank you card with my signature on it, but you will also find extra skates, grips, all the type of stuff that you would expect. A nice cable. The USB-C cable that it comes with is actually really good. It almost feels like paracorded-ish. I have a number of these, and I kind of have started using the USB-C cable everywhere as my main USB-C cable. The weight of the mouse, which to me is a really strong selling point, because you get a premium quality build with a really low weight of 55 grams, which for its size I think might be one of the best out there. Even if you go like for the more niche mice out there, which are usually not this size, they're not that much lighter at all. The closest in size is the GPX, and even the GPX2 being lighter than the original GPX, by GPX I mean G Pro X Super Light, doesn't quite cut it, because the Harpe is 55 grams, whereas, and I weighed this myself, whereas even the GPX2 is 58 grams, whereas the GPX1 is 62. So you can definitely notice a big difference in weight when you use the Harpe versus the original GPX. Not as much with the GPX2, but it's still there. The sensor, Asus, being a big company, they have a lot of room for R&D, so they have their own sensor, which might be a modified Pixar. I don't really know, but I know that it feels amazing. I don't really feel anything. At this point, I feel like the sensors are all quite there. The R pace is top notch, and I really like the feeling of the clicks. Not much travel, really easy to click, very consistent across the two of them. I like the scroll wheel, because it has a little bit of tension, and I like that. Very easy to click, very good feeling, and I like the side clicks a lot. So personally, I feel like in terms of specs, it's up there. It comes with a price though, but it is a premium mouse that kind of competes with the GPX and all of that tier of mice that you buy, but you know that you're getting a really, really high quality product from a big brand with actual QC and customer support that actually exists and works, and all of that. When it comes to the software, Armory Crate is a little bit overweight, let's call it that, but it does allow you to do a lot of things. It also has some interesting settings, one of which I'm not sure I've seen that often. They call it, I think, angle offset. Basically, it rotates what the horizontal axis for the mouse sensor is, which means that you can kind of hold your mouse in a tilted way and move it, and that will still count as an horizontal line in the computer. It's actually very, very interesting of a setting that I think accommodates for a lot of grips where like the mouse is slightly tilted without you having to fix the moving horizontally with your wrist. Very, very interesting feature. So that's all for the specs. Let's move on to the creation story now, because I think that's interesting. Because one of the other selling points of the mouse, which you can see here, is the AimLab settings optimizer, which is what I worked on together with the rest of the company. So let me explain what the idea is. The settings optimizer is a piece of software where you play and you get analyzed as you play, and then we, being able to read and write to mouse memory, basically can try different settings for you, and then we can measure your performance across different settings, and then based on that we run machine learning, statistics, whatever, an algorithm to recommend a specific value for those settings for you. So it's basically like the sensitivity finder extended to all of the settings of a mouse: DPI, that angle offset that I mentioned earlier, and lift of distance, which to me will be the next big wave when it comes to mice. Because really, where else can you innovate at this point? You kinda can cover all of the shapes, all of the weights, the sensors are all top notch. I feel like moving forward, and this is me trying to be almost like guessing the future, mice will either have to compete on stuff like this, which is deep integration with actual software that tries to optimize its settings for you, or we will have to see a completely new class of human interface devices. I don't know if like drawing tablets are going to be the next big thing or whatever, but I feel like that will be what actually elevates input devices for competitive gaming in the future. So that's why I really felt, and that was kind of my pitch, that we had to do this settings optimizer thing, where like a very unique thing, which is having access to the firmware of the mouse, which is not something that is usually possible for the operating system. We could read and write and try this thing. So if you buy the mouse, you can just hop in AimLabs and you get a couple of cool things like a custom title that you can use in leaderboards, and access to the settings optimizer, which to me is still really interesting. And I hope we will have a chance to expand it as time goes on. Now, the other portion of it, the shape, I want to start pivoting to that because I did have a say on it a little bit. And my contribution, I would say, is the moving the hump a little further back. Some of you might know, but for the longest time, my main mouse was the Zowie A12, and that mouse does have a hump that's kind of pronounced and in the back portion of the mouse. So this mouse is kind of GPX-ish, but the hump is a little bit further back, which to me makes it really easy to claw, because the mouse ends up being locked in really nicely in this portion of the palm, which kind of becomes like this when you're clawing. But the mouse is really long. It's funny because if you just look at the size of the mouse online, it will feel like a huge mouse. You'll be like, wow, this is much longer than the GPX, etc. But the GPX actually feels bigger in my hands than this, because the sides are really flat and they have an amazing coating and this little finish, which makes it really easy to grip. And this side has an AimLabs logo, which is always nice to see. But it does feel really small. It's really long, so you can see that when I claw it, the way I claw it, there's kind of a lot of mouse in front of my fingers. If I show you the same thing on a GPX, you will see that there's not as much mouse in front of my fingers. But that doesn't really count. You can feel it, so you won't feel any larger because of that. So while yes, it is noticeably longer than the GPX, but you won't really see it. You won't really feel it. It kind of feels small. Honestly, I wish at this point that the hump was a little taller. That is the only thing that would make this mouse better for me personally. But I feel like this is a very safe shape that will satisfy a lot of grips. Very easy to palm because it's longer. And very, very nice finish, very high quality. So I think the shape is really, it's a safe shape, kind of like the GPX, because the idea was, you know, again, high price, esports focused mouse needs to be not too opinionated in its shape. I do think that it's a little more opinionated than the GPX, but still very, very safe. So there's a good chance that if you do decide to buy it, no matter your hand size or grip style, it will be comfortable for you. But I am still very proud that I managed to convince them, not that I did that much, to move the hump a little bit further back, because I do think that really helps stabilize. The sensor position, I think is really good. It's centered kind of like the GPX. With the specific grip that I use, it ends up being almost exactly in the same relative position to my pivot as the GPX, which means that it feels very similar to a GPX in the way I aim with it. But it does feel really good in game and in aim trainers. For example, my current high score in 6-shot, which is 192,000, I did get with the Harpe about a year ago or so. Now, In game, it does feel really great because it's very stable, especially when playing TAC FPS. I feel like I just could never perform with smaller mice, or mice are a little too flat, or like have a hump that's too low, because I lose that stability that I mentioned that I get by having the hump right inside my palm, touching on a large portion of the surface area. So it's always felt really good in tactical FPS. I play Counter-Strike with it a lot, Valorant with it a lot. I really like the in-game feeling, and overall I think it's a really, really good mouse. If you do find it for a decent price, there's also a white version which looks sick in my opinion. You should try it. I think it's a breath of fresh air. It's a really, really high quality mouse from a really, really high level company, so you get the safety of buying a mouse like that compared to buying, you know, a mouse from a more niche company. It's very safe and it's kind of large, so personally I'm not a fan of this wave of just all mice need to be small, because as I was saying, I don't think that's good for performance, because yes, it will feel good and you will move really fast with it, but it won't give you the stability that you need to actually perform in games, whereas this will give it to you. And then you get the settings optimizer, which is a really interesting one, and that cool setting, the angle offset, which I think really is going to be a setting that some people will really enjoy. So all things considered, again, I'm biased. I do recommend buying it. So at this point, let's move on to the bar score. I'm going to show you what bar score it got and specifically the numbers. We'll cover it really quick. And this will be the very first bar score. And we'll see if the GPX2, which is the mouse that I'm going to be reviewing next, is going to beat it or lose to it in terms of bar score. Okay, so this is the Harpe Ace bar score, the very first bar score. And it gets an 82.5. That's 74 from the benchmark score and 8.5 from a feeling score out of 10. As you can imagine, me having had a say on the shape and being a little biased, I'm not gonna lie, I gave it a really high feeling score. I've used it a lot in games and I've always liked it. It has never made me feel not confident. I did run this same bar score twice because it's the first time I'm running it, and I got exactly the same values for all of the tasks, which is reassuring, but still I am getting a lot better at aim trainers. Basically I'm getting back to my old form. We're getting close to world records on a lot of static scores again, so I am afraid that as I move forward I will have to go back to the Harpe Ace and try this again, because I do think that I will be getting just better at the tasks, so it would be fair to give it a second shot once I get better scores in general. But still, 82.5 right now, the very, very first bar score, that's what the Harpe Ace gets. This is it for this video. The next mouse that I will be reviewing will be the GPX2, because I have one, and then I have a ULX on the way. Actually, I have two ULX, which is the Final Mouse Ultralight X. At this point I can't keep up with Final Mouse naming, but they have a small one and a large one, and I got both. Then for my very first stream back, I have a couple artisan pads. I bought a new Hien and a new Zero, the orange one, because the orange looks sick, and also the Shirenkai X-Soft and Mid V2. Especially the Hien and Zero, I'm interested because I will be comparing them to my 3 years old almost Zero and Hien that have seen a lot of usage, and I want to do that on stream to celebrate me coming back with a stream that I've done before, which is unboxing artisan mice. So stay tuned. I will be reviewing the GPX2 very soon and posting the bar score. I hope you liked this. Remember, subscribe, like, share. It will give you 10% increase on your scores. Guaranteed, probably. So, see you soon. Bye-bye.